Do you have a plan to improve the inadequate vocational assistance program under the workers' comp system?
Well, as a strong supporter of the workers' compensation reforms, and as the only one of the candidates here who stood up as soon as the governor's proposal was announced and urged its passage because of my strong belief in it, I recognize that one of the major things that we need to do for those workers who are injured and who can be rehabilitated but who do not have the ability to perform a job, that we need to make sure that we have an adequate connection between them and opportunity. And that opportunity I see in a place where it has been profoundly missing, and that's in Oregon's great community college system. I think that we have a much more close role that can be played between our community colleges in terms of job training and retraining and placement than has been done for our injured workers. That connection has not been made because community colleges themselves have been set apart from our educational system instead of integrated into it the way it should be. You'll have time at your leisure to read of my educational plans, but I want to make sure we have a continuum of education from kindergarten through graduate school. When we do that, we find logical places for the education and re-education and training of those who are injured on the job and need new assignments.
Candidate, Ms. Roberts.
Well, as a person who chaired the 1986-87 workers' comp package for Governor Goldschmidt, we talked a great deal about how you keep a worker who's been seriously injured and cannot go back to their old job in a situation where you know they're going to be productive again. And the longer they stay out of work, the more difficult that becomes. So the first priority is that you get them physically well and that you move immediately into effective, appropriate job training. Job training means they get to start over in a job that really takes care of their talents, even though it may be a different work arena than they had before. And we are now training those workers in the community college campuses, in special training schools, in operations that are privately funded as well. But we need to be very careful that in the process of training those workers, we don't find ourselves giving money to training firms who are not really providing the training necessary to put those workers back to work. We need to watch for those who abuse the system if we want those workers to have good, productive, family wage jobs.
Question number 6 will go to Ms. Roberts first. What do you feel is the #1 health care problem for Oregon, and how do you plan to help solve it?
The #1 problem is one that we are all experiencing more every day, and that is finding accessible, affordable health care. I have brought forward in this campaign a complete plan to talk about what it is going to take to make that care available to every Oregonian, starting with employees, thousands of them who work in this state and have no health insurance and are at risk every single day. I want to expand the pool the legislature started for small businesses so we can make the pool bigger and the cost of insurance less expensive and allow those small businesses with the addition of a tax credit to help insure their employees. We've got to find a way to help senior citizens deal with health care and to not encourage them to take the first most expensive step, which is the nursing home, when there are alternative kinds of home care available for them. We need to look for every creative solution, and the plan I have put together does exactly that. There are ways to do it, and one of them is to make sure that rural areas of this state get their fair share of the health care needs. And I think that now that is a major problem in most of rural Oregon.
Mr. Frohnmayer.
I know firsthand, because Lynn and I hear on the telephone every day from people whose health insurance has run out as their kids face catastrophic costs from the same kind of illness that our kids have had. And it's agonizing to have to talk to them and see what we can do, whether across the nation or in this state, to make sure that they get the care that they need to save their lives. I, too, support expansion of the existing pools so that people have better bargaining power when small businesses go to purchase insurance for their employees. I support Senate Bill 27, which allows the better rationing of health care so that people in need have a broader range of services. And I've worked with the United States Congress to try to get the waiver to put that important program into effect. I believe in and have announced to this public a program for care in rural areas which have desperate needs for access. And looking down the line, We need to make sure that we deal with a terribly important problem, and that's prevention of health care accidents and issues in the first place. That's a major strategy of our state's health division. It has great promise for the future, and it is one that we should pursue aggressively, and will be if I'm elected governor.
That ends this section of the debate. The third section of the debate will be cross-questioning. We have 15 minutes. The candidates will alternate posing questions to one another. There will be a question, 1-minute answer, and a 30-second rebuttal. We begin with question posed by Mr. Frohnmayer.
Candidate A.
Candidate A.
In the past few weeks, the attacks and the counterattacks in this campaign have intensified. I accept and will honor the judgment of many Oregonians who have urged us both to lower our voices. In yesterday's Oregonian, it was reported that you said, and I quote, "Dave Frohnmayer is the only candidate who arrived at age 50 in a race for governor and who didn't have credentials for having committed time to children in his local community." Barbara, did you really say that about me, and do you believe that to be true?
Dave, I did not say you had not given time to children. I said you were the only major candidate who had arrived at this point in their life without having given major contributions of time to your community. I did not say to children.
Well, I guess there are two parts to my response. The first is that I believe that I will want to be remembered most for what I've given to children, not just my own, but children in Oregon and children around the world. And I've worked on my local Red Cross board, and I've raised money for Birth to Three and other things. But there's another point that I really think is important here. And then let's look for the higher ground. Let's state our divisions and our differences and our competing ideas about this state's future and how to make government work. That's my plan for the next 28 days, and I urge that we do it together.
Our next question will be posed by Ms. Roberts.
Dave, during this campaign, I've made proposals to invest in Oregon's future, and for each proposal, I've leveled with the voters about the cost of the programs and where the dollars will come to pay for them. Dave, to fund government at its current level, the spending lid must be broken. You supported higher ed faculty raises and engineering research center in Washington County and have still not provided a budget to the voters. What are your proposals? What do they cost? And where is the money coming from?
I know one basic truth about Oregon government because it stems from our Constitution and common sense, and that is that you have to have a balanced budget in Oregon. I have said I support a modified expenditure limitation because the last two legislatures have so far exceeded the resources based upon the prior formula that it cannot be maintained, but it must be updated and it must be maintained because otherwise we will see in the same thing that we are seeing in Washington, D.C., and that's a government out of control that can't live within its means. I've cut budgets in tough times. Every single state budget in Oregon has a 5%, 10%, and 15% contingency cutback in it already as it's submitted to the governor's office. I recognize that we cannot have spending out of control. I recognize the investments we need to make in Oregon government, and my budget will come in on target with the resources available without breaking the bank, a point to which I'll return in this debate.
Dave, I have difficulty understanding that we, after a year, don't have a budget or the dollars for the programs you proposed. I have your record as a legislator in AG, and for 6 years you voted for 68 tax increases, 24 new taxes and fees, including the gas and beer and wine and taxes on hospitals and agricultural seed, and your own AG's budget has gone up 140% since you became the AG. I think your record speaks for itself.
Question from Mr. Frohnmayer.
I've returned $3 to the public for every dollar of taxes that have been given to my office. That record speaks for itself also. I believe that a good manager and a leader must be fair. In this regard, let me ask you about the voters' pamphlet. In every election since 1986, you have included in it a personal letter to voters at a cost to the public of some $53,000. In over 50 years, no other Secretary of State, not Tom McCall, not Norma Paulus, has done such a thing. In retrospect, do you think that it is fair or wise to depart from this tradition, especially when you are a candidate for office in that same voter's pamphlet?
Dave, I think the important thing about the voter's pamphlet, it is government's way to outreach and inform the voters of this state. The letter that is in there on the years I run and the years I don't run. It is to say to Oregon that voting is important. It tells them when the voter registration cuts off. It tells them all the things they need to know, and it encourages them to participate in the election process as more and more Oregon voters walk away from that process. So I think it is a wonderful way to say it matters to Oregon voters, and I have done that. I have never, ever used that for any political purposes, and I resent the implication that I would ever do that.
Well, the letter repeats information that appears completely on the next page, and I guess Oregonians can judge this issue for themselves. Frankly, I'm bothered by it. But more importantly, the last legislature passed a law that prohibits county election officials, when they are standing for office, from including anything else as a letter to the voters in the county voters' pamphlet. And I think that that law ought to be expanded to include all elections officers.
Next question, Ms.
Dave, you talked a lot in this campaign about your record on women's rights and also on giving support to legislation endorsed by local law enforcement. In 1977, you had a chance to support a bill requested by the Oregon State Sheriffs, the Oregon Association of Police Chiefs, the Oregon State Police Officers Association, as well as the Women's Rights Coalition, that stated that cohabitation and marriage were not valid defense against rape. Dave, you voted against that bill. Fortunately, Senate Bill 503 is now law. How can you reconcile that vote with your claim that you have been active on behalf of women's rights?
13 years have passed since that vote, and I would cast it differently today, because I think rape is ugly, it is awful, it is an abomination, and it has ruined the lives of rape victims whom I know personally, who've told me of their tragedies. I voted at the time on that bill because I believed it would be difficult to find a prosecution under it. In fact, it's only been used once in the famous Rideout trial, and it resulted in an acquittal. But as a symbol of the violation of people that should never happen, I'm glad that it's law, and I would vote differently today.
Dave, I'm glad to hear that you would vote differently. It was disturbing to see you sign on that bill as a co-sponsor and then vote against it. I think we need to be very careful that we don't let legal technicalities prevent us from supporting legislation or court procedures that protect women in the state.
Question, Mr. Frohnmayer.
In our last two debates, I have asked if you plan to raise taxes for your new spending programs. You have said that you have no such plans. In last Saturday's Oregonian, you acknowledged that you will pay for some of these programs with a 5% sales tax that you have proposed. Approximately what portion of your new tax will be used to balance the budget for your new programs?
The 5% sales tax would not be used in the first year of the budget in order to increase basic school support, because in the first year we would not have yet passed it and we would not yet have had it on the ballot. In the second year of the biennium, if the sales tax passes, which is dedicated to education, a portion of that, most of it, would be used, in fact, to completely replace the property taxes, and the remaining amount would be used to increase basic school support. My budget balances, Dave. I have a budget. I've proposed it, I've published it, and I've shown it to Oregon voters, and this is the kind of thing I hope that you will do in the very near future.
I only have a 5-cent calculator, but it doesn't compute. How can you balance a budget on the basis of a tax that hasn't yet been proposed or passed by the people yet? Governor Goldschmidt's budget is $5.5 billion. Current receipts are $5.3. Governor Goldschmidt has proposed $240 million of programs, which I assume you support, and you have proposed $261 million more beyond available revenues, and that's according to the state's own budget officers. So my question to you is, what would you cut, or where would you get the money?
Question, Ms. Roberts.
My question to Dave, okay? Dave, in the 10 years while you've been Attorney General, Oregon has gone from 11th to the 6th highest among the 50 states in serious crime. While crime has been rising, Oregon has dropped from 12th to 27th in the number of adults under supervision. Dave, you've made a great deal of your long-standing commitment to crime fighting and prison building. In the past 4 years, did you ever personally testify before the legislature in support of measures introduced by others to build new prison cells?
Absolutely, and I conducted the studies that gave the legislature the numbers that would be reliable scientifically and fiscally in order to support it. As you may know, I served on the Criminal Justice Council and I chaired the Commission on Sentencing Guidelines, and it was our job to say how many new prison spaces does Oregon need, what are they going to cost, and how many felons who commit violent crimes against people can finally be put away for the time they deserve under those proposals. I chaired that effort, which took hundreds of hours of well-meaning citizens of the state of Oregon. I testified to the legislature about what it would be and what it would be required. That testimony by myself and by my staff is a matter of public record for the state, and it has been continuous and continuing over the last 4 years, and I'm grateful for that contribution I've made to making sure that Oregon is a safer place.
Dave, since I have proposed a large prison building program to finish what was begun in the last 4 years, I hope you will feel strongly enough not only to testify as you say you have, but to do the thing you did not do the last time it was on the ballot, and that is to use your name in the voters' pamphlet to show Oregon citizens that you support those prison beds, as well as to show legislators you support them.
Question, Mr. Frohnmayer.
Gee, lots of rebuttals might be kind of fun here, but let me ask another question. You support the shutdown of the Trojan nuclear plant. Closing Trojan will cost Oregon jobs, clearly raise utility rates, and force us to find new and presently unavailable means to generate power. The report of the Oregon Department of Energy and the Oregon Public Utility Commission estimates that the cost of the shutdown, and it's conservative, would be between $440 and $920 million. If ballot measure 4 passes and you are elected governor, what specific steps will you take to address the problem of jobs, increased utility rates, and immediate alternative power sources?
Well, the most immediate of all power sources is called conservation, and we can learn to do it in Oregon. The issue with Trojan is a safety issue, and it shouldn't be anything else. That means that we have no safe place to store nuclear fuel in this country because the federal government has failed for 4 decades to find us the site they have promised. The indications are that it might cost $3 to $5 additional per month over a 20-year period for Oregon voters and Oregon consumers to have the kind of protection that says don't make new fuel if you have no safe place to store it. We have conservation, we have solar power, we have wind power, we have cogeneration, and I think the most important thing we need is safety. I am not willing to risk the lives of Oregonians, the Columbia River, our land, our air, and the safety of all of the animals in that river and our use of it for the future over the issue of shutdown costs.
Shutting that power plant will not move one spent fuel rod 1 yard from where it currently is. The safety issue is the same, and it will remain. And Oregonians should not pay for the federal government's failure to be timely in its response to permanent storage. There is no energy surplus anymore, and I've studied the reports of the Power Planning Council. Conservation strategies that now remain are not cheap, ladies and gentlemen. They are very, very, very expensive strategies that require sacrifice. The alternatives are pollution alternatives, and that's why leading conservationists, including a past chairman of the Oregon Environmental Council, agrees that that plant should remain open because the alternatives are horrendous and the costs are enormous.
Question. Question, Ms. Roberts.
Dave, I propose job training to help displaced timber workers gain good, strong skills to become heavy construction workers, secondary wood products workers, and the builders of new Oregon homes. You've called that training a cruel hoax. You've also called job training for welfare mothers to give them work skills to support their families a cruel hoax. Dave, how are displaced workers and welfare mothers going to start over again if they have a governor who won't support the job training they need to work?
That misstates the position that I've taken that's very clear. I believe that last spring you proposed to move people to Portland to build sewers as the alternative to displaced timber workers. And I and others said that that was a cruel hoax. I support and have on record supported community college retraining programs such as the one at Lane Community College, where I have personally met and talked with the people who profit from it. But we need to do everything to make sure, first of all, that we have a stable timber supply so that we don't displace so many people. And the second thing we need to do is find jobs in our communities, close to those timber communities where people have all of their assets tied up. What I want to see and what I've argued for is compassion for those people who are going to be displaced. What I've argued for is minimizing wherever possible the impact of federal decisions beyond our control so that we will not need retraining. I went out to the Medco mill and met a 54-year-old man only a few weeks ago, and he said, "I've been doing this all my life. Mr. Frohnmayer, I can't be retrained." And I believed that in his case. He was speaking from his heart. He was terrified of his future. And I think simply to tell all of those persons that they can be retrained can be cruel, instead of realistic about trying to protect their job in the first place.
Ms. Roberts, rebuttal.
Dave, I never talked about building sewers in Portland. I talked about building sewers. You need them in Lane County. You have the biggest unsewered place in the state right in Lane County. And those are good 10.5 dollars an hour jobs. And even if that answered the timber companies, why is it that you don't believe that welfare mothers could be trained to hold decent jobs instead of staying on welfare? Employers in Oregon have a shortage of skilled workers right now, and it's going to get worse. They're trying to find ways to match up the people who are there with the job holding that they need. And they're going out of state for employees right now because Oregon has a severe shortage of those who are trained workers. I think we can match up those welfare moms with good training to the employers who need those good workers, and I think many of those timber workers will learn how to do different things in the timber industry. They will build our roads, they will build our homes, and they will be workers with good, sound, family wage jobs in the future. There is no hoax about job training. The only cruelty is to put a person out of work without that.
That is the end of the cross-questioning. We will now move to Section 4 of the debate. Each candidate will have 4 minutes for a closing statement. We will hear first from Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. I think that this is the last one-on-one debate between Dave and me. As you probably know, I wanted more debates, and I wanted them in more cities, and I wanted them with more candidates. But Dave felt otherwise, and it takes two to tango when it comes to debates. But as I look back on these debates and on the last 8 months of this campaign, I can't help but wonder at what clumsy undertakings statewide political campaigns seem to be. We make the mistake of trying to reach out to too many people all at once. We give speeches and we hold news conferences and we put on debates and we run a lot of television ads. But let's face it, none of these techniques allow the candidate to really communicate with voters. When we give speeches, we're stuck behind podiums talking at you instead of with you. When we have too few debates, then we allow the voters to see the opportunity to compare us, and it doesn't happen often enough and the television doesn't cover. Debates and news conferences then get reduced to 45 seconds on the evening news. And television ads. Well, they're staged and they're too often slanted. I think Oregonians are smart enough to not believe everything they see in a 30-second political ad. If I had one wish, I would wish that I could campaign like I used to campaign 10 years ago, one-on-one, talking directly with the voters. Because when you look a candidate in the eye, really look them in the eye, you know what they're made of. For me, politics has always been one-on-one. When I was fighting for my son and other disabled children, I went to the Capitol and I talked to legislators one-on-one, and they listened. I served on a local school board and learned to make important decisions face-to-face with parents and neighbors and teachers. Talking with people one-on-one gives me something that all the 30-second ads in the world can't give me. It gives me an opportunity to listen. And when you listen, you learn. Here's what I've learned. People want their elected officials to be independent. They want them to make a decision according to what's fair, not according to party affiliation or who gave them money or who their friends are. Oregonians want their elected officials to be independent because Oregonians are themselves independent. I learned that Oregonians felt squeezed at the cost of living, particularly in health care and housing, and they watched those go up and up and up. People who live on a tight budget expect their government to live on a tight budget, and they're right. Budgets must balance, and it's just plain wrong to spend a dime of taxpayers' money if we don't get at least 11 cents of value out of it. I've learned that voters are smart enough not to believe that candidates who promise them the sun and the moon are real, and voters know the difference between tough talk and tough stands. People want their elected officials to do something. They want their public officials to look at the issue and evaluate it, to take a stand and to act on it, and then to be accountable. I've learned that Oregonians want public officials who will listen, and ones they can feel comfortable with one-on-one. I'd like to leave you tonight by telling you that if you elect me governor, I will work hard, I will be fair, I will be independent, and I will take on the tough issues. I will listen, and I will never take Oregonians for granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frohnmayer, would you please give your closing statement?
I thank the sponsors of this forum. I thank my mom and dad and my wife, Lynn, who are here with me tonight, because they have given me so much of what it means to be in a special place. And I thank you all for the special welcome home and indeed to this auditorium, which was part of my own education and my schooling. A very special part because this community was together. It, at that time, was united, unlike Oregon now, which is divided with warring voices and deep conflicts that need to be healed. But I entered public service because I believe that when you're given so much by a community that you owe something back. You have to give something back. And as I've traveled Oregon, that's what our fellow citizens are telling me. And yet the pressure is on this great state that we love. We all want an effective, drug-free school system that prepares our children to live in the next century. We all want to bury a cruel and oppressive property taxation system that taxes the poor and the elderly out of their homes and discourages business investment. We used to support our schools, and we don't anymore, and that must change, and it must change with action now because the pressure's on. We all want to be safe in our streets, and it's a tragedy that little kids have to be instructed how to walk home safely in almost every community in this state. I was pleased that the President recognized the Community Drug Awareness Program of this Southern Oregon area just this week as a way that citizens here are finding ways to come together. But in my prevention programs that I've announced for the state has not done its part, and that's why the pressure's on us to do a better job in managing state assistance to local communities where the people really feel the brunt of those problems. We all want people to have work in this state. We don't want rash policies that put them out of work. We can't have taxation policies where budgets don't balance. We need, whether it's the single mother or the hardworking parents, to make sure that they have family wage jobs and they can afford the daycare that they need. Those are things that we can have in Oregon if we work together. But only if we work together. Only if we're willing to cross party lines for a new idea. Only if we're willing to recognize that every region, every person, every ethnic group has its place in the sun. I'm running for governor because I believe profoundly in the ability of Oregon to be the greatest place where our sons and daughters and their descendants could ever hope to live. I don't want them to leave for Washington or California because we didn't care enough. And I don't want anyone in this state to be deprived of opportunity because our state government has not been managed wisely, or we spent beyond our means, or we failed to work together. I, too, would prefer to see you all face to face. In my first campaign for office, I knocked on 9,000 doors, I wore out 3 pairs of shoes, and I got 2 dog bites. But I had a chance to see people eye to eye, and I'd prefer that, too, in this election. And as I began, I close by asking my distinguished colleague in state government to join with me for yet one more opportunity, one-on-one, televised throughout the state of Oregon, so that we can take our cases to the people of the state of Oregon. I grew up in this state. I've seen its forests and its mills. I've taught in its classrooms. I've helped to craft its laws. I brought my family here, and we're raising our kids here because we love this state. And I can make you 2 promises now. That if you give me the privilege of being your governor, I will listen, and I will exercise my independent judgment to lead Oregon in the public interest. Those are promises that I can keep, and I make them to you without reservation. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the American Association of University Women and the League of Women Voters, I would like to thank the candidates for appearing before the citizens of the Rogue Valley to discuss the issues with which we are concerned. We also wish to thank Cable Access Channel in Ashland for their efforts to bring this debate to citizens who are unable to be in the audience tonight. We wish to express our gratitude to the Medford Police Department for providing security, and to the School District 549C for providing this facility. Our thanks go to Kay Dix and Barbara Berry of Ashland, and Vera Morell and Ruth Brody of Medford and their committees for putting this forum together. The 2 other candidates for governor have been asked to be available to you in the wide hall at the entrance to the school. There are many other candidates and a large number of issues on the ballot. We encourage you to attend meetings, read newspapers, listen to the radio and the television presentations, and become an informed voter. Remember, the last day of registering to vote is October 16th, and Election Day is November 6th. Absentee ballots are available. Thank you for coming.